I'm really trying to force the fall vibes, even though it's literally 74 degrees outside right now. So it is finally time for my September wrap up. I'm so excited. I ended up reading quite a few books this month, and it's a really interesting month because obviously in the middle of the month, September 15th started Latina Heritage Month, and so I did end up reading a Latina book for the first half of Latina Heritage Month. Hopefully maybe in October I will read a lot more, but this is where we're at the moment, and I'm just so excited to talk about these books with you guys because honestly September has felt like the longest month of the year so far. Like, I don't know why, but this month just dragged, and honestly not in a bad way. Like, I am genuinely so happy that September felt like it lasted like 3 months, mainly because I love fall. September's kind of the beginning of fall, and just like the vibes are so right, honestly. Even though it's hot outside, it's totally fine. The vibes are right. And so I ended up reading quite a few books, like I said. A couple of them were audiobooks, a couple of them were ebooks, and then one of them was a physical book that I got from the library. And I actually meant to finish this book last month in August, and I've had this book out from the library for literally 2 months, maybe even 3 months at this point, but it's been a while, so I'm really excited to talk about it. But first, we have to get into the first book that I read in September, and that book was Enter Ghost by Isabella Hammad, and I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars, and this is one of the audiobooks that I read this month, and this one is by a Palestinian author, and I have actually read quite a few books by Palestinian authors this year, so that is super exciting, and I really enjoyed this book. Basically, it's about this young woman, and she is visiting her family in Palestine, and when she's there, she finds out that they're kind of doing not really like an underground production, but just like a very like local production of Hamlet. And as a Shakespeare girly, I was very drawn to this book. I was super excited to pick it up, and this one did not disappoint. I found it to be really interesting, really culturally rich, but also like it really implemented those facets of Shakespeare really well into the narrative. And I also really enjoyed seeing this from the perspective of the female main character. I thought that she was really interesting, and she brought a really different perspective, and I think that that was really intriguing. And in my Goodreads review, I said that my only real critique of this book is that I felt like it was a touch too long. I felt like there were moments that dragged a little bit too long, or that were kind of repeated in order to kind of bulk up the narrative. But I felt like this would have been a lot stronger of a novel, and maybe would have gotten 5 out of 5 stars for me if it had been slightly shorter. If like some of the fat had been cut, some of the just, you know, like superfluous scenes and elements had been slashed and gotten rid of, and just like made it a little bit more snappy, I think it would have been a lot better. But in my review I said, otherwise I found it to be a really great usage of Hamlet as a mirror to the struggles of the Palestinian people against violent settlement, and I completely stand by that review, and I really enjoyed this book. So if you are looking for books with Palestinian authors, I highly recommend Enter Ghost, especially if you are a Shakespeare fan. If you love Shakespeare and you're like me and your favorite play is Hamlet, this is going to be perfect for you. Okay, so the next book that I read is the physical book that I got from the library that I've had literally for months now, and that is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I finally finished this book. I literally finished it the 4th of September, so it wasn't like I dragged it on a whole long time, but it felt like a long time. And thankfully my library will automatically like re-borrow the book for me. I can't remember the word right now. I'm like having a literal brain fart. I hate when that happens. When I'm like, oh, I'm forgetting a very common and simple word. Anyway, thankfully it does that for me, and so I haven't had to get any fines or anything like that, so that's good, because honestly I am the worst at remembering to take back my library books. I'm terrible at it. I have like a history of being bad, and I have had to pay upwards of like $100 in fines before, and I think it's been multiple times. I think it's been multiple times. I'm really bad at remembering to bring back my library books, so I try to limit myself to like 1 or 2 library books at a time, and I have to remember to return this book literally right after I finish this video. Anyway, so most of you probably know that I read Problematic Summer Romance about a month or so ago, and I absolutely loved it. 5 out of 5 stars, one of my favorite books of the year. What I didn't know when I first started that book was that it's basically a sequel to Not in Love, which I had started Not in Love when this book came out, and my first impression of the book was that it's not for me. Didn't really enjoy it first time I started it. I think I got close to around 40% last time I picked it up, and I just could not get into it. However, after finishing and loving Problematic Summer Romance, I was like, you know what, you have to pick it back up. You have to give it another chance. Maybe you'll like it better now that you have like the context. And I ended up picking it up physically because before I had listened to it as an audiobook. I was like, maybe it's the audiobook thing, maybe it just like wasn't translating correctly in my brain. So I decided to pick it up physically, and I'm so glad I did because it was so good. I did only end up giving this book a 4 out of 5 stars, but I did truly really love it. I think it was just kind of like towards the end it gets a little like convoluted, a little bit dragged out. And so I just felt like this book was so long. It's kind of a long romance book, honestly, but it is very, very different from what Ali Hazelwood has written in the past or like currently. It's not quite as lighthearted or fluffy or whatever. There is a little bit more like smutty scenes, but honestly, I don't feel like it's all that different compared to what she typically writes. Like, I feel like typically Ali Hazelwood books are pretty smutty. Like, not like obviously not the smuttiest thing in the entire world, but if you're comparing them to like the traditional like mainstream romance book, they're more smutty than that. So this one felt like maybe like one notch above her typical work, but it wasn't like anything crazy. But I did really, really enjoy this. And so basically this follows these 2 main characters, and they are currently kind of at odds because the female main character, she works as like a scientist, as a food scientist, and she works for this company that is currently being bought out by the male main characters. And that's where my brain shuts off. I don't know business. I don't know any of this, the like minutia of business and money and stuff like that. That literally does not clock in my brain. It like does not compute. I don't understand it. So I just know that they're at odds. He wants to buy out the company that she works for. It's creating a lot of tension. She is really upset because she is very close friends with the CEO of the company that she works for, but there is also a lot of like things going on that she doesn't know about. Also, the female main character grew up with a lot of like food insecurity and in a really destabilized home, and so that also kind of like compounds into her emotional attachment to this company and like the CEO and whatever. So there's a lot of things going on that are at play, and you do get to see a lot from the 2 characters that are in Problematic Summer Romance, and so that was kind of fun. I got really excited every time those 2 characters were mentioned, especially if they were mentioned together. It literally lit my heart on fire. I love Problematic Summer Romance, and I think honestly that is gonna set me up for failure in the future with other Ali Hazelwood books, is that I loved Problematic Summer Romance so much. I don't know if any other book is gonna compare. I don't know, and this one definitely did not compare, honestly. I really enjoyed it. However, it was just like, it didn't really give me the feelings that I got with other Ali Hazelwood books. So this one, it was fine. I think that if you don't typically like Ali Hazelwood books, you might really love this one. And if you do typically like Ali Hazelwood books, it'll go either way for you. Either you're really going to love it, you'll feel like it's a breath of fresh air, or you're not going to really love it. Maybe you'll just feel meh about it, or you just might really hate it. I don't know. It's kind of a polarizing book, at least in my experience and from what I have seen from other people. So I think it's a really interesting read, and I highly recommend picking it up physically because I don't feel like this book translates well into the audio format. But either way, it was an interesting book. I'm glad I read it, especially because I needed that context for Problematic Summer Romance. But yeah, if you are planning to read Problematic Summer Romance, make sure to pick this one up first, because I don't think that reading them in the wrong order was very, like, it was a good idea. So don't copy me. Don't do what I did. Learn from my mistakes. Hold on, I need a little bit of a Dr. Pepper break while I figure out what book I read next, because it's been a long time. Okay, so the next two books I actually read basically one right after the other, and they were both on my Kindle, and I finished them while I was on the drive up from my house all the way up to Northern California. It was a long drive. I think the drive is like 6 hours, or 5 or 6 hours, something like that. It's a really long drive, and so I had plenty of time to finish one of my ebooks and then also finish and complete another ebook. So I started off by finishing Summer of Love by Sophie Thomas, and this one was so good. I hate to bring up this book again, but if you enjoyed Problematic Summer Romance, I think you're gonna really love Summer of Love. It was such a good book, such a good summer romance, so fun and romantic, but also really steamy, and there's like a lot of tension. Basically, this book follows the female main character, and she is an author, a romance author, I believe, and she is about to propose to her longtime boyfriend. And so she's kind of like getting everything together, getting everything ready, and in the middle of her getting ready for this proposal, her boyfriend walks in and figures out that like she's gonna propose to him, and he's immediately like, don't really think that's a good idea, because if you propose to me, I will say no. And so they end up breaking up. That relationship totally implodes, and while she is grieving that relationship, she ends up getting a visit from one of her neighbors who she's become really close with, because he is also an author. And so they have, over the past couple of years, I believe, they have kind of created this friendship and also sort of like writing partnership in a way. Like they like to write together and edit together, and they will read each other's work and all that kind of stuff. So that's been really good. But he ends up visiting her and finds out that she's like grieving this relationship, and he's like, I'm so sorry, you know, what can I do for you? And she ends up asking him to be her date to her best friend's wedding. And it was supposed to be her ex-boyfriend, but obviously that relationship is over. And the neighbor ends up saying yes, because he has been in love with her for a while. He really likes her. And so they end up going to the wedding together. It's kind of like a destination wedding. So they are there together for like a week. But also the ex-boyfriend is good friends with the guy that her best friend is marrying. So he is also there, and it's just like a lot of tension, a lot of drama, but it's really fun. I love these characters so much, and I love the relationship that they form. And also, if you are a Shakespeare fan, this is a perfect book for you, because the female main character is a huge Shakespeare nerd, and she collects a lot of Macbeth copies. Like from everywhere she goes, she tries to find a new copy of Macbeth, and that is so cool. And you could really tell that the author loves Shakespeare just as much as like we all do, or you know, if you're a fan of Shakespeare, how much you love Shakespeare. I was really impressed by it, because sometimes you will read books from authors and they'll like write a character who supposedly loves Shakespeare, but they have like terrible opinions or like don't know what they're talking about. And what really sold it for me is that the female main character shows that she very clearly understands the actual point of Romeo and Juliet, which is kind of like my litmus test. I'm like, I'm kind of judgy, so I will judge somebody and how much they love Shakespeare on if they actually know what's going on in Romeo and Juliet. if they think that Romeo and Juliet is just like two stupid teenagers who are horny and will kill themselves because they're horny, that's not what Romeo and Juliet is about. That's literally not at all close to what it's about. So whenever I see that opinion, I'm like, oh, you don't actually like Shakespeare. You don't actually like Shakespeare. Sorry, stopping right there. That doesn't work for me. So I was really impressed that the female main character was like, she got it. Like, she got it immediately, and I loved it. So as a Shakespeare nerd, I highly recommend this book. It was so good. I think that I got it from Kindle Unlimited. So I had like a free trial of Kindle Unlimited, and I read it through Kindle Unlimited. So it's there if you have it, if you have that service. Definitely take advantage of it and read this book. It was so good. The next book that I ended up reading was an e-arc of Grape Juice by Eliza Dumais, whatever. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, my bad. Hold on. Okay, I quickly found like a pronunciation video on YouTube, and it's pronounced Eliza Dumais. And I really enjoyed Grape Juice so much. It was so good. Literally read it in an entire sitting. I did not look up from my Kindle like even once. This book was so good, and it was honestly really perfect because I ended up reading it on my trip up north to Northern California, and we were going wine tasting in Napa, which I have never done before, and I was super excited about it because I love wine so much, and I love going wine tasting because I live in a really like big wine tasting area of California that isn't Napa, and so I really do enjoy going wine tasting. And I had never been to Napa. Like, I had been to Napa, but I'd never gone wine tasting there, so I figured that reading Grape Juice would be perfect, and I was correct. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it so much, and I had never read a book from 831 Stories, you know, that kind of thing. I've seen it around a lot on Instagram, and I had been really intrigued. And so when I found this book on NetGalley, I was like, I need to check it out. I need to see what this is all about. And I would be really down to read more books from 831 Stories because I think it's just really cool, and I love all the covers. I love how they all kind of like match, and they're all just like different colors of the same pattern. I don't know. Anyway, Grape Juice is basically about this female main character, and she works for this company that is sending her on a trip to kind of work at a vineyard in Italy in order to kind of come back and talk about her experience and really use that experience to kind of help her at her job. Sorry, I said Italy, I meant France, in rural France. And it says, on her first day of alcohol-addled adult summer camp, she is paired with Henri, equally disillusioned, albeit in his own very French way, and she realizes just how much can change if she's willing to get her hands dirty. And so basically, she is working at a vineyard in France and is just having this like kind of whirlwind summer romance, and is just having all these new experiences. And I feel like the best way to kind of describe this book and kind of like have a really good comparison is if you love the way that Eve Babbitt writes her stories, highly recommend this book. It's so similar. Like, I got the same feelings from reading this book as I did from like reading any of the stories in Black Swans. And I love the way that Eve Babbitt tells the story. I love the way that she creates these characters and creates these moments that you really feel like you could live in, and you really feel like you experience them yourself. And I love that kind of storytelling, and I think it's just very similar. And so I really enjoyed this book. It's very short. It's under 200 pages, and that's kind of why I was able to finish it that quickly. And I really love this book. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. And I feel like if I was going to recommend any of the books that I read in the month of September, it would be that book. Easily, it would be that book. And also I feel like if you really liked the plot line in The Summer I Turned Pretty, where Belly runs off to France and lives her best French life, highly recommend this book. You will love it. It'll be so perfect for you. And as somebody else who also really loved that plot line and getting to see Belly outside of her like comfort zone, I thought that this was a really great book, so highly recommend it. The next book I ended up reading was How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kuang, and I actually ended up reading this book because I'm pretty sure Yulin Kuang is the one that is doing the adaptation of Beach Read by Emily Henry, and so I knew that I had to pick this book up just to kind of like suss out what type of author, what her kind of perspective was, because Beach Read is very, very near and dear to my heart, so I had to check it out. So I picked it up and I liked it. It was fine. It just wasn't anything super spectacular. It didn't really wow me. It wasn't really any different than a lot of like your run-of-the-mill romances are. At the end of the day, I thought it was just fine. But basically, this book is about the female main character, and she lost her sister to suicide when she was a teenager. And basically this is a huge trigger warning for suicide. Obviously, if this is something you are not comfortable hearing about, definitely maybe don't watch this part of the video, and definitely don't pick this book up because it deals very heavily with that topic. But basically what happened was that her sister jumped in front of a moving car, and the guy that was driving the car is actually the male main character in this book. And for a long time, the female main character kind of blamed the male main character and kind of blamed him for the death of her sister, and always felt that she would never truly forgive him. But when she is a little bit older, I think she's in her 20s or 30s, and she has written a few books. They're very popular and they get adapted into a TV show, right? Yeah. She ends up going to LA to kind of work as a writer for the TV show, for the adaptation, and she finds out that the male main character is actually another one of the writers in the writer's room, and they have to work together, and it just kind of like all goes from there. There's a lot of heavy topics dealt in this book, and it was really interesting. I thought that it did a really good job at kind of exploring those themes. I think that one thing I would have changed though was that I felt like you never really got an understanding of how the main character was feeling through her grief. I felt like you actually got a better idea of how her mom was dealing with the grief, which is really weird because you don't see a lot of her mom, but I felt like the main character, the female main character, kind of experiences a lot of her grief through the way that her mom experiences it, which I think is kind of interesting, but I would have liked to see more of her relationship to her sister and what that meant to her personally outside of the experience of her mom. But otherwise, I felt like it was just kind of like a standard romance. It was totally fine, and I don't know, it's just like it didn't totally click for me. I didn't feel like everything hit the mark perfectly, which obviously that doesn't need to happen, but I kind of wish it would. So yeah, it was just kind of like a meh book. It was fine, it was a way to pass the time, but it's not really sticking with me. I'm not really thinking about it weeks later after I finished it, so not my favorite. The second to last book that I finished in September was my Latina book that I read for Latina Heritage Month, and that was When Javi Dumped Mari by Mia Sosa. I have read a few Mia Sosa books in the past and I've really enjoyed them, so I was super excited about this book. Unfortunately, this one really missed the mark for me. Like, I truly did not like this book. There was nothing redeemable about this book, nothing I liked about it. It was just, it was so frustrating and so tough to read. I don't even know where to begin because I don't want to drag this book too much, but basically When Javi Dumped Mari is kind of like this sort of spanning romance where these two met in college and they've always kind of been friends, but also kind of like attracted to each other, and they've always kind of like teetered back and forth between being together and being friends and being distant, and you know, whatever. It's all this huge cycle, and I just never felt like they had a strong connection to each other. While I was reading this, I felt like the female main character was so wishy-washy, and not just in this relationship, but also in like the values that she held as a person. I just didn't feel like we ever really got a resolution on like who she is as a person. I just felt like she is very strong in her beliefs when she's in college, but then once she graduates and like has to work for her dad's company, she kind of loses herself in that, and I never feel like we get back to who Mari truly is. So that felt a little bit weird, and honestly I just didn't feel like she was a super strong character. And then the male main character was so childish and so immature, and it was so gross to me and such a turn off, and just like was not at all charming. And it seemed like everybody in the narrative was super charmed by Javi and like who he was as a person. Like they loved him, and I'm like, I don't get it. This guy sucks. He acts like he's 14 years old and he's like in his 20s. So I did not like this book. I don't even want to talk about it any further. I truly did not like this book, unfortunately. Do not recommend it at all. If you enjoyed it, more power to you. It's fine, but not for me. There are plenty of other Mia Sosa books that are much better than this one. This was a complete miss. And the very last book that I read in the month of September was actually one that comes out today. When I'm filming this video, literally today it comes out, and that is It's Different This Time by Joss Richard. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and this one was so good. And it's also kind of similar to When Javi Dumped Mari, because it is another like spanning kind of romance, very much like When Harry Met Sally. And basically it's about this female main character, and she is an aspiring actress. She really wants to act on Broadway, but she also kind of has some dreams of acting in LA for like a TV show or a movie. And she's kind of torn between those two things, but she really wants to see where she will make it. But currently she's living in New York and she is looking for an apartment. She ends up finding this really great deal, and it's of like a townhouse, a little brownstone, and she is like, this is crazy. This guy's renting this place out for literally nothing. She ends up running into the male main character and kind of tipping him off about this brownstone, about like how great of a deal it is and whatever. And so he actually goes and tries to kind of like steal it from her, and she finds out and she's like, what the heck? I literally did not tell you about this so you could go steal my brownstone, my great rent. And he's like, okay, so like maybe what if we live together? It's a huge place, like it'd be great to split the rent. And so she ends up agreeing to that, and they live together for quite a few years while they are both kind of making it in their own separate careers. Like she wants to be an actress and he really wants to be a chef, and he wants to own his own place and the whole 9 yards, and I love that. So it kind of goes back and forth within the narrative of like the past and the present. And in the present, they have been split up for quite a while. She's been living in LA, he's been living in New York, and they end up coming back together because the landlord that they rented the brownstone from has actually passed away and has left the brownstone to both of them. And so they kind of have to split the ownership of this brownstone, and they have to figure out what they're going to do with it within the next month, or else the brownstone will go to the bank. And so they end up living together in this brownstone again and kind of rekindling their friendship, rekindling this romance that they once had. And this book is truly so good. I really enjoyed it. I think that my only critique about this book, because I truly loved everything about it, like I loved how the aesthetic really shone through the narrative, and I loved how just like all of the characters felt so well developed, and all of their relationships felt so well developed, and I loved the romance, and I really truly believed it. However, my only critique is that I felt like the one character that wasn't fully developed all the way was a female main character. I felt like she was the maker of her bed, if that makes sense, if you're understanding what I'm saying, you know what I mean? Like she made her bed, she does not want to lie in it, and she refuses to admit that she made the bed. She refuses to admit to any of her mistakes. And even at the end, when like you're trying to resolve all these issues, she still cannot comprehend that she's the problem. That at the end of the day, of course everybody makes mistakes. Everybody in this book has made a mistake, but she makes the biggest mistake. She makes the most damaging mistakes, and she refuses to cop to them. She refuses to admit that she did anything wrong. She refuses to apologize and all this other stuff. Like, I just felt like she didn't really change as a character, that she didn't really go through that development throughout the story. Like, there was no character arc for her. I feel like she's the same person in the beginning of the story as she is at the end. And I don't want it to come off as me thinking that she's like the worst, because she's not, but I just felt like I would have liked to see a little bit more development from this character. So that's my only critique. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I needed to say that, because I felt like this book could have been an easy 5 out of 5 stars if we had seen more growth from her as a character. Otherwise, really enjoyed it. Very much a New York kind of story, very much When Harry Met Sally. So if you're a big fan of that movie, I think you're really gonna like this book, because it is a little bit different, obviously, from that book, but I love this story. I could easily see myself like buying this physically and revisiting it as like a physical read. I mean, I did read it physically the first time. I don't know why I said that, but I mean, like, I want to own the physical copies, so maybe that's why. Anyway, I did read it on my Kindle, so it was technically physical. Anyway, I had like a really interesting September month of reads, and it just kind of was up and down. It was up and down. There were a lot of more ups than there were downs, so that was really great. But it was interesting, and I think that I ended up reading a really cool and eclectic kind of like group of books. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know in the comments down below if you read any good books in September, or if you read any of the books that I mentioned, what you thought about them. I would love to know. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Threads, Goodreads, Storygraph, TikTok. All the links are down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!